The mistakes that are not correctable start happening when you don't take that very, very seriously. Where if you make a mistake, but you've always done the very best that you possibly could for your investors, you're probably in a pretty good spot. Probably nothing bad is really going to happen to you.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Listen, if you're getting some great value from these shows, I need you to do me one little favor, and that's leaving us some honest feedback with a rating and review. It helps us, but it also helps other listeners find this show and get that same value that you are getting. And if you haven't done so, or this is your first time listening, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we've got a great show. We're going to be talking to Tilden Moschetti. Hey, before we jump into today's show, I want to tell you about a transformational event that's taking place in April. It's called the Real Estate Wealth Builders Conference, and it's being hosted by my buddy, Dustin Heiner. Now, I had the pleasure of attending this event last year, and I got a chance to network with some amazing speakers. In fact, there's going to be 40 plus speakers at this year's event, including yours truly. So listen, if you want to join us and transform your life, go to rubicon.com and get your ticket today. You can use my name, John, as your promo code and save 10%. Now, this event is for both seasoned investors and new investors, so all who are serious about taking their investing to the next level are welcome. Again, just go to rubicon.com and use my promo code John to save 10% on your ticket today. And I'll see you there in St. Louis. Now, Tilden Moschetti is a syndication attorney that focuses exclusively on Regulation D offerings for real estate syndicators, business owners, entrepreneurs, and private equity funds. Now, Tilden is a highly regarded expert in syndication as an attorney, a syndication coach, general counsel to 2 private equity funds, and an active syndicator himself. He's been featured on NPR, NBC News, People Magazine, the National Law Journal, and many more locations. Let's welcome to the show, Tilden Moschetti.
Thank you so much, John. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Tilden, I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take a couple of minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, so I'm a syndication attorney. My firm focuses exclusively on Regulation D offerings. So that's what people normally think of as syndication or real estate funds or things like that. So I help clients put together the legal documents so that they are compliant with the rules of the SEC and the local states. At the same time, I've done a lot of deals for myself, and I do a lot of deals for clients, and I put that practice to practice, right? So I make sure my clients are successful. So any additional help I can give them, talking about marketing or talking about how to scale their business, whatever it is, make sure we cover that too.
Yeah, we talked about Regulation D offerings. Again, for some folks who are listening, maybe this is their first time really wrapping their head around syndications. Can you just maybe describe what syndications are at a high level? What is a syndication? What's not a syndication?
Sure. So anytime that you are making an offering to people who are going to invest money and they're going to rely on you to make money for them, so they're expecting profit, that's a security. So securities under the Securities and Exchange Act says we need to either register with the SEC or fall under an exemption. The most common exemption is Regulation D. So basically, the syndication is breaking up a apartment building or any sort of asset into investable units so that investors can invest into. The manager or the sponsor, you basically, or the syndicator, they run the show, they put together the deal, and they profit from it. But they also make sure that their investors get profit.
Yeah, and talk to me a little about deal structures, right? Because you kind of explain, hey, whenever someone's relying on you, then they're investing passively into the security, and you have to have a means of doing that, which is where the syndication process comes in. I know some people will just try to do a JV, right, and just do a joint venture. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on like maybe the difference between a syndication and a JV and when you need to use one versus the other?
Yeah, so a joint venture really needs to be a joint venture. So it's people coming together, they're both participating, they're both actively involved, not just giving money with expecting that profit, but they're like detailed involved in the decision making. So there are a lot of people that do try and skip over the rules. They're not in compliance. If they're putting out an offering and just saying, okay, well, we'll put you on the LLC, but we're not going to file anything with the SEC. It is still a security as long as those investors are taking a passive role. If they're actively involved, totally a joint venture, no need to register with the SEC. It's not a security at that.
Yeah, not to get, too deep into the legal side of this, but, when you talk about legally involved or actively involved, is there a threshold or like what kind of constitutes being legal or, actively involved in a deal?
There's not. It's when you see it, uh, every step that's taken in order to kind of make it look like an active participation is encouraged. So I know that there are some people out there that say, well, we'll just have a meeting once a month, but really, or once a year, or once every period, but really I'm making all the decisions. Or, just give me the money. I'm going to run the show. I'm going to choose the assets, things like that. That's where it's not active, right? It really is passive. It's not very hard to see that that's what's going on. When it's active, it's really like a major contribution, normally of labor and money and time and resources in order to make this whole thing work. I mean, that's really what a joint venture is supposed to be, rather than just if it looks just like an investment, it's just an investment. It's a security.
Yeah, and I think the point you're making here is that you want to make sure you're doing things the right way. And in this case, if someone is actively involved, if they're a part of the decision making process, you're having regular meetings, you're collectively making decisions, then yes, that's a joint venture. But if one person is making the decision, or one set of people are making the decisions, and another set of people are not making those decisions, then it really is more of a passive investment, which is a security, which should require you to do a syndication and follow the appropriate legal landscape, and following the SEC documents. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what those documents are and, what a subscription agreement is and what that process looks like?
Yeah, so there's really three main core documents that your investors see. The first is the private placement memorandum. That's document really, it goes through the details of what exactly we're talking about, right? So it covers the terms, it covers the basics of the business plan of this is what we're investing into. It talks about distributions, but it also talks about risks of the investment and conflicts of interest that are naturally there. So that's the private placement memorandum. To me, it's the first document that I work on with clients because it establishes really everything about what's going on. The second document is the operating agreement for the investment entity. So that operating agreement for the LLC that's built where the investors are putting their money into. And that's really the absolute rules of the road. This is how everything's going to take place. So when there's distributions, this is exactly how it happens. It's a very formal document. It sets out those rules. The third document is the subscription agreement, and that's really where the investor signs on to the investment. So they may say, in exchange for $100,000, I'm going to be buying 100 units of this investment. And I know this is a security. I know this is what's going on. I've gotten the PPM. I've reviewed it. It's really that binding that investor to that investment entity itself.
Yeah, I love it, right? Those three documents you mentioned. First is the PPM, the private placement memorandum. That's going to give more details on what the actual investment is. The second document is that operating agreement, which gets into how decisions are going to be made, how distributions are made, and how the company will actually operate. And then that third is the subscription agreement, which is the exchange of money, really buying the shares or buying kind of the interest into the company for that investment. All three documents are critical when you are doing a syndication deal. Let's talk a little bit more about kind of the syndication space, because one thing that I think a lot of new syndicators stumble with is really just understanding what to look for. What are some key mistakes you see new syndicators make, and quite frankly, even more established syndicators, but what are some of the common mistakes you see people make?
I think the most of the mistakes happen kind of at the outset. So there are a whole bunch of things to do and it gets kind of confusing of when you're supposed to do it, right? So not only do you need to do the normal things about finding a good deal, right, or something that you want to invest into, but also taking into account, I've got to find investors, I've got to get legal documents together. Ultimately, I'm going to have to notify the SEC and the states where my investors are coming from. And then once we've closed, I've got to run the deal, right? I've got to not only be doing everything that I would do from if it was me buying it for myself, but I've got to be making distributions as I promised and communicating and doing all those things. Suddenly, you've got all these interested partners that you may not have had before. So it can seem overwhelming at first when you first start doing it. And I think that's where the mistakes lie is a lot of times is, okay, well, I'm getting into this really big thing, so there's some things that aren't as important. A lot of times for people, they mistakenly choose not to prepare a PPM or not to file a Form D with the SEC or things like that, just because they're trying to manage the number of things that there are. And I think the other part of it is and I don't really see this a lot, but is your investors are at the end of the day, your investors are trusting you with a lot of money. This $100,000 or $50,000, whatever they're investing with you, is a lot of money, and they're trusting you with it. And I think if the mistakes also start happening, the mistakes that are not correctable start happening when you don't take that very, very seriously. Where if you make a mistake, but you've always done the very best that you possibly could for your investors, you're probably in a pretty good spot. Probably nothing bad is really going to happen to you. Whereas if you start doing things because, well, all you want to do is own this property and the investors' money, there you're not really thinking of the investors. That's where bad stuff starts happening.
Yeah, you mentioned two kind of categories there. One is just managing the process, knowing everything that needs to happen, doing it in a timely manner, making sure you understand that process from, finding the deal, getting the investors, making the filing with the SEC, managing the property. And then the second is really just, managing the investor relationships. These folks, as you mentioned, are investing significant amounts of money with you. So recognizing that this is a serious investment, you've got to do what's best for those investors, because if you don't, that could be, really a problematic situation where now you've got, angry investors or even just disappointed investors. And that could be, a problem for you and the business. Let's talk more about kind of the process real quick, because, I know a lot of people, they spend all their time looking for that deal. And then they get that deal and are super excited. And then the clock starts ticking and they are overwhelmed with, I've got 60 days or 90 days to try to close this thing. I got to find an attorney to draw up all these documents. I got to start talking to investors. Can I raise all this money in this time frame? And it becomes overwhelming. At what point should we engage a syndication attorney and start to lay out kind of the roadmap for this process?
In the multifamily space, most of the time, because your closing periods are so short, most of the time you're going to want to have it as queued up as possible. So you want to have who are going to probably be your investors queued up as much as possible, who's going to be doing your legal documents as much as possible before you get into contract. That's because once that, like you said, that clock starts ticking, it's ticking fast. The more that you can front load that stuff off on the investors, the better. Most of the time, I'd say I get brought in at that point where the sponsor, the syndicator knows, I'm going to do a deal no matter what. Even if I find 123 Main Street and that deal falls through, I'm going to find another one. I'm going to put an offer on 456 Second Street. That's generally like the best time for me to come in, because we can start shaping what that is going to look like before there's even a property attached. That said, my turnaround time is 2 weeks. And I think I'm really one of the fastest. Other attorneys out there, I know take longer. There are probably some that do it as fast as me. There's probably no one who does it faster than me. So I'm taking 2 weeks out of your time to begin with anyway, right? If your idea is we're going to find the property first, get it under contract, and then start the legal document. So mostly in the multifamily space, though, I find people doing it a little bit ahead of time. They know kind of what they're looking for, just so we can get the process going quicker.
Yeah, and what you said, I think is key. Is like even if you don't have the exact property, but you're committed to doing a deal and you're going down that process, you're getting close. You want to have your key team members lined up, right? Who are those investors? Who's your syndication attorney? Like you want to have those people ready to go so you can start working on some of those documents and start, having everything teed up. So it's much easier once you do kind of get that property under contract and you're ready to move forward.
Mhm.
Let's talk about what it takes to find the right attorney, right? Because, everything sounds great, and most of us are not attorneys, so we don't know the legalese and can't really figure out who's good, who's not good, and what questions to ask. Can you talk to us about, maybe some key questions to ask or some key steps in the process to vetting syndication attorneys?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is make sure that the attorney is somebody who this is all they do, right? You don't want somebody uh who does syndications and they also do criminal law, right? The totally different thing. Or what I see a lot is people who are real estate attorneys and they will occasionally write a PPM or something like that. That's probably not the best answer. I'm not the only attorney that this is all I do. And there are other attorneys out there that are good. But I think the main criteria is look for one that this is all we do, because our business practice, everything about what we're doing is focused entirely on this. Our process time's probably faster, and our level of knowledge in this is just more robust because we don't have to focus on other things.
Yeah,
So
till
that's
then,
probably most important.
yeah, there was a time frame, maybe, I don't know, 2015 or 16 to maybe 2021, 22, where it felt like, anyone who invested in syndications did well. And, it just really, I didn't hear any stories or very many stories of deals that didn't pan out. That certainly isn't the case today. And when it
Oh,
comes to our legal documents, again, with the attorney, it's like one of those things where, you do the legal docs, you put them away somewhere, and you hope to never have to need them again. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are needing to review those documents. You mentioned you want to have an attorney who focuses on this full time and doesn't do all sorts of different types of law. What are some of the mistakes or some of the issues that are either coming up or that these attorneys may miss because they're not actively in this space on a day-to-day basis, particularly since I guess the risk for exposure is a little bit higher today than maybe it was 5 or 7 years ago.
I think that portion of will this deal work? So I've done a number of deals for myself, and I part of what I do with my clients is I'm always thinking, are we going to be able to get it funded? Right? Are there investors that are going to be interested in going for this? And are there what's the likelihood? Like I have a regular repeat client who just regularly sends me deals. Is a he sends me things like that he's working on. And so the last one was going to be a partnership with another syndicator, and the deal was terrible. Right? I mean, it was like, okay, this is why I you got to stay away from this deal. The marketing materials look great. The other syndicator had certainly a PPM that laid it out, and but if you didn't know the deal, and the attorney that prepared their PPM was also a sophisticated person, but they've never done a deal. And so I don't think there's any other syndication attorneys that do their own deals. And if you don't know if you haven't done your own deal, you wouldn't know based on this that they're never going to make money, right? There's no way this is going to pan out. this tenant is gonna default. This is going to happen. It's gonna fall apart. And turns out they didn't do the deal, and that tenant did leave, and so it did die. So that's the reason why you kind of want to find somebody who's got that sophistication who can let you know, okay, this deal here looks like it's going to work. And it doesn't bother me at all if my clients don't take my advice. I feel it's my duty to give it to them. But I'd much rather see, if it's, I'd much rather give them my advice. And if they choose to take it, great. If they choose not to, and it's like my advice is don't take it, at least I did everything I could do, right? I'm trying to help them be successful. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
You know what I like about it, and I was going to mention this earlier, but I think it's really interesting, and I don't want to say admirable, but it's a positive that you're also an investor. And the reason I say that is you understand the space from both sides of it. And because of that, you can look at a deal and not just get into the legalese of, hey, here's my concerns, or hey, we should think about this, but you can also look at the actual deal and say, hey, there's some concerns in this deal. Have you thought through this? And whether or not they take your advice, at least they've gotten some additional feedback, particularly for newer investors who may be syndicating their first deal or second or third deal. It helps to have people on your team who actually know what they're doing beyond that singular level of expertise, right? If you can get attorneys who are also investors and they can review your deals and give you a couple things to pay attention to or look out for, hey, I had a client structure deal this way and we have some issues there. You may want to think about this. That's just going to make it easier for you to have success versus having someone who maybe they don't know anything about syndication, but they know the law. So they'll give you, the legal verbiage that you need, but they have no idea whether or not your deal is going to be successful. So I think that's really interesting that you kind of bring that lens to the table and actually provide that feedback for some of your
Yeah,
investors.
I'm surprised, and I think I'm the I of keeping track of my peers out there. There aren't a lot. I think I might be the only CCIM, right? That's a certification for commercial real estate, and I'm surprised that that's the case. And to get a CCIM, you have to do a number of transactions and be involved primarily as a broker, but you need a detailed involvement. But that level of being able to underwrite a deal or just being able to just tell it really quickly seems like it should be a very valuable tool. Whereas in other spaces, in other parts of our business, in the whole securities world, you go to an M&A attorney, you go to somebody like that, they've probably got a pretty robust set of underwriting tools already. But the syndication attorney space seems to be a little bit weak on their underwriting capabilities and their deal, thirst to do deals, which I find strange because I advocate for syndication. I think it's wonderful. I think it's great. I've made a lot of money at it. All of the other syndication attorneys, I believe, do that too. But why aren't they doing their own deals? I mean, do your own deals. You'll make good money at it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely interesting, and I appreciate you providing that feedback and that viewpoint there. Talk to me more about again some of the issues you're starting to see, or let me say it differently. Given some of the challenges deals are facing, can you give us either language or a clause or a point that we as operators need to make sure we have in maybe our disclosure documents, or whether it be subscription or PPM? And then also give me the same thing for an LP. If I'm a passive investor looking to invest in a deal, what's one thing that I should be looking for that maybe isn't in every deal or isn't in most deals?
So aside from the regular things of making sure it gets funded and also how bank financing is going to work, probably the two biggest things that I would be more aware of now than I would have been in up until 2021 would be capital calls and redemption clauses. So a capital call is when the syndication itself needs more money. So I've had this, as an incident in my some of my deals One of them, we came really close to needing a capital call. Our reserve account, I think, got down to like $1,000 because COVID hit. And we also had some legal expenses right then. And knowing how you're going to handle the need to ask for money when you need it, it's either get the money or the property is going to go to heck, right? It's all going to fall apart. Everybody's incented to make it happen, but you need to know how to make it happen. And so for LPs, they need to know, well, if you're going to be making a capital call, what's that going to look like? Because it's possible, right? There's no guarantees in these things, and the capital calls do occasionally happen. The second part is redemption. So I have never had a deal where an investor hasn't needed to get their money out at some point during the investment before the natural timeline. Never. I've done a lot of deals, and it always happens. If you have more than 3 investors, it's going to happen. And you need to plan. And if you don't have a plan, you need to at least know that you don't have a plan, because that's an okay answer. But you need to know what that is, because it's going to come up. And for investors, they need to know that too, right? So the limited partner needs to know, okay, if I go into this deal, is there an opportunity for me to get my money back? Or am I going to need to find somebody to buy me out? And how is the sponsor, how's the syndicator look at that situation? If I need to find somebody to buy me out, how are they going to be? Because ultimately they're going to have to approve it anyway. So having those kind of considerations are probably the 2 most important things.
I love it. You talked about capital calls and redemptions, and that really covers both sides, right? So if you're an LP or an active investor, how are capital calls going to be handled? What's the redemption clause if an investor needs to get out? And we always say these are illiquid assets, right? It's not like a stock where you can just sell them and get your money in your account, within 24 hours or so. I mean, this is one where it does take time, usually months. And you want to have some way to exit, even if it is illiquid, but understanding what that process is certainly key for these investments.
Yeah, and they may not want, I mean, they may not, it's normal. It's never a good thing. It's always a life event on when they want to redeem. And syndicators always want to help their clients. I mean, at least my client base always wants to help their investors. We're trying to do the right thing. Sometimes it's not possible. Many times it's not. I've never had a situation, though, where there hasn't been some sort of way to get the investor.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's great clarity. When we think about syndications, there's been certainly an influx of syndicators over the last, again, 5-7 years or so. And not sure what the numbers suggest things are today, but who should be syndicating? I know it's kind of an open space and a little bit of the Wild Wild West, but if you're an investor today, you're thinking about making that transition from just investing your own assets to potentially becoming a syndicator, what questions should you be asking yourself? What should you be thinking about to see and set yourself up for success?
Well, certainly everybody should be. I mean, as a syndicator, there's more money to be made by syndicating than by just owning the asset yourself. You're diversifying your portfolio, which just reduces your overall risk. When you're in charge of it, you will have more work to do, but you get paid well for it. So it's in your best interest. And if you've got a good pipeline of properties to purchase, it's a no-brainer, right? So then it just becomes finding and connecting to the right investors and making sure that you're communicating in a way that moves them. For limited partners, they're motivated too. So, a good building is probably going to start at about $1 million, and so you can only have so many assets with any given thing because they're in these large chunks. Whereas, you may have an extra $100,000 that you'd like to invest. Buying into a syndication, if you trust the sponsor, you trust that syndicator, you're going to make money on that 100,000. You're not going to have to do anything, right? It's a passive role. And so it benefits kind of both sides, right? The syndicator gets paid for that extra work they're doing, and the LP gets the benefit of passive role. They get more diversification in their portfolio, and they have less to, they don't have anything to really do on the property except cash the checks.
Yeah, I love it, right? So one, as an investor, there's more money to be made. You can also diversify your own portfolio. I think there's great things that come with scale, because when you're scaling, you're tapping into more money. And the way I always like to think of it is, instead of you going out and taking, $100,000 and buying maybe a $300,000 or $400,000 property yourself, get 10 people together. Now you've got $1 million. You can go buy a $3 or $4 million property, and you can hire a property manager and you can run that. You have scale. It's easier to manage than you managing, one house or a duplex. So that's a great way to start thinking about how you scale. The thing that I always push people to keep in mind, though, is that it is a service business. So I think too often people fixate on how much money can I make, what kind of fees can I charge, but they don't recognize that this is a business. These are people, these are investors. They're investing a serious amount of money, and you have to be able to provide that customer service, the investor relations, and really focus on those individuals. So if that's something you're interested in, certainly learn more. One place to start is by reaching out to our guest here today, Tilden. You can reach out to him on his website, moschetti.com. That's MOSCHETTI law.com, and connect with Tilden there. Tilden, right now we're going to transition to our round of insights. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
Yeah. So, apparent failure would probably be I went into a deal in Arizona. It was Arizona's a great state, lots of investment. I actually grew up there, but this deal was not. It was not a good deal, and the underwriting didn't look good, and the way our partnership was structured, I didn't get a veto vote on doing the deal. And at one point, one of the partners said, well, forget the investors. This is going to make us a lot of money, which was kind of like my warning sign of this is going really, really bad. So the learning there was is I got a lot more honed on finding a good deal, and just I don't deal with those people. The only people I will deal with is people who all that matters is the investor. I can lose money as long as I protect my investors, and I only do people with that same mindset. So the win there was I only do business with people who I really like, and I am much more successful because of it.
Love that. So I'm going to ask a bonus question at the end based on that, but we'll come back there. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
I don't know. I spend a lot of time in news outlets, just making sure that I'm up to date in economic news. I read Financial Times and Bloomberg, too much. I'm kind of addicted. But having a pulse and being able to talk about whatever's going on monetarily with investors is useful. I can talk about what's the Fed's doing, because some of them know, are very sophisticated, and they want to know what that means for them and what I think about it. And if I wasn't reading those sort of things, I'd probably be in. I wouldn't be in as much as esteem with them as I'd like to be.
All right. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
That would easily be a series of books called Sports for the Soul by Brian Donnelly. Wonderful, wonderful set of books that really talk about success and those things that make us successful, using sports as an analogy. He writes fictional stories that emphasize key, like, strategic and like motivational and wonderful things that you can do to help ensure your success.
All right. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
For me, every morning, I focus, spend some time focusing on gratitude, and focusing, and I then shift into something of what I want to make sure that I accomplish over the next, over the next period.
Give me your number one insight for selecting the right syndication attorney.
Talk to people, and if you don't like it, the person that you see here, this is me, right? So if you like me, great, we should talk. If you don't, that's totally fine. Find somebody that you fit with, right? Somebody that you're happy to have a communication with, not somebody who just sounds good, but just somebody who you actually think you want to work with, because hopefully you're going to be working with them a lot.
Long-term partnership, right? So find that person you want to partner with long-term. You're in Raleigh, North Carolina. Give us your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Probably there's a restaurant nearby our house called Northside Bistro. One of the owners is actually 2 doors down from my office. Great food.
Northside Bistro, it is. You gave some great stuff. I want to get into this one bonus question. I was, just in my head. We talked a lot about the importance of taking care of investors and finding the right partners. Any tip for our listeners on vetting or asking the right question to identify whether or not your partners are really dedicated to taking care of investors? Because, I think the challenge there is that everything's great at the beginning of a deal, right? It's like dating. Like, everyone shows up with their best face on, but you almost need some level of adversity to figure out who you're really dealing with. And typically by the time that happens, it's almost too late. So any advice or tips or strategies you have there?
Yeah, trust your gut. I mean, normally the partnership that I'm working on right now, all of our communication is, leading up to it has always been about the investors. It's always just been, that's all we really talked about. The deal was important, but investors, this is what they're saying, this is what they're thinking. I know that partner, no way I'm going to have a problem as it relates to what's really important, which is the investors. So just listen to the dialogue, listen to the text. If all of it is about how much money we're going to make, if your calculations when you're underwriting a property, if you start with the syndicator and then go to the investors, that may not be so good. So
there you go. Good tips. I appreciate that. Tilden, you gave us some great information. I appreciate you sharing kind of your breakdown on, syndications versus JVs and when you need to use either. Letting us know the 3 components of a syndication deal, right? You got to have your PPM, your operating agreement, and then your subscription. And then also talking to us a little bit more about some of the key questions that you want to ask, what to look for when you are looking for a syndication attorney. And then even just talking about partnerships, right? And what to look for in a partner. Where are they focused? Are they focused on investors? Are they focused on what they're going to make? Making sure you're partnering with the right individuals. Again, if you want to learn more, you can go to moschettilaw.com. We will put a link to that in our show notes. Tilden, I want to thank you again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.